Welcome into another episode of the Autzen Audibles podcast. Erik, Skopil, John Evans here on a Thursday afternoon, shall I say, bordering on evening, recording a preview podcast for Oregon's road game at Kinnick Stadium against the Iowa Hawkeyes. A ranked matchup, John. We didn't necessarily know this would be the case. In fact, the week started and it wasn't going to be a ranked matchup. And then the CFP came out Tuesday night. Iowa number 20, Oregon number 9. Ducks a little bit lower than they were in the AP. Iowa quite a bit higher than they were in the AP poll. Feels about right, though, when you do the deep dive into these two teams that they're both ranked. Like I know Dan kind of was miffed at the fact that Iowa opened the week not ranked. And I think the more I've looked into this Iowa team, I'm in position to agree, just like the college football playoff. I guess before we jump into the matchups and some thoughts here, just big picture, any reaction you had from Oregon being number 9 in the CFP? We haven't done that on the podcast. Didn't know if you had any thoughts. I've got a couple, but go ahead.
I think it's what I was reading was that the committee was just talking about strength of record and resume kind of stuff, where Oregon, when you don't have the best team you've played all year is Indiana and you lost that game, just doesn't stack up necessarily with some of these other teams. Although I wouldn't say certainly not the two Big 12 teams ahead of them. Those guys will knock each other out this coming week when BYU and Texas Tech play each other. And then at a certain point, you're also just looking at the dauntingness of an SEC schedule to jump a team like Ole Miss. But all those resumes are really similar for those one-loss teams at this point, I feel like, especially the teams that aren't the Alabama, where they have wins over teams like Georgia that really strengthen that I feel like those teams will continue to get shuffled over these next couple of weeks. Even as teams like Notre Dame get in the mix, because they're, even with 2 losses, you have a strong resume there.
I saw a narrative developing from several people in the Oregon circles and non-Oregon circles that Oregon can't take a loss and still make it. I totally disagree. I think a 2-loss Oregon team most likely gets in. I won't say it's 100% certainty, but if you look at Oregon's situation, and John touched on it, Oregon does not have an impressive record strength of schedule resume at this moment. 3 of their final 4 teams are currently ranked. They're going to get a big jolt there. Those metrics are going to favor Oregon here down the stretch. And if they're able to beat 3 of these 4 teams, I think they'll be in a pretty solid position. Now, the counter to that is a couple of things. Is A, they may be competing with some of these teams that they're facing. And if they do take a loss to an Iowa, or they do take a loss to a USC or Washington, does the head-to-head, if that ends up being a final spot, how does that play out? And the other part, I guess, that I would bring up is I'm curious on what the committee's choice and kind of sense will be on conferences and how many each of the 2 major conferences get in. If the Big Ten is going to get 4 teams in, I would be rather confident Oregon will be one of those, even with a second loss. If it does feel like they want to favor the SEC, which has a lot of teams up in the top 12 right now. A lot of those teams do play each other. John indicated earlier, like Texas Tech, BYU facing each other this weekend. Like Texas and Texas A&M still have to play. Oklahoma, and I think another couple. I looked at the schedule. There's a bunch of overlap amongst those teams, so there will be some of that. But if it ends up being 5 SEC, 3 Big Ten, and Oregon takes a second loss to one of these teams they're competing with, and like let's say Iowa, USC, or Washington run the table and also finish with 2 losses, that's where things as a 2-loss at-large berth may get kind of dicey. At the same time, I feel pretty good about where this team is at, but we'll see. I think this weekend's game, and maybe that's the natural transition, actually carries some CFP implications, John.
Yeah, I don't think that you're necessarily out of a playoff picture with 2 losses, but you're certainly not guaranteed to be there.
Yes,
and like
correct.
you said, if you do run into a situation where you're face a head-to-head scenario where you have a 2-loss Iowa team or a 2-loss Washington team that is coming off of a win against Oregon without many other top-tier wins, then you'd be losing the game to Indiana and whatever team that other one is. You'd have to be relying on other teams to lose games and muddy things within that 8 to 12 section of the playoff to really find yourself a spot. So you want to close out this season as strong as you can, not lose any more of these games, because that's how you guarantee yourself to be in the playoffs. You're certainly not guaranteed. I'd say it's a lot more 50-50 if you get that second loss.
I was out with a loss in terms of the CFP. That'd be 3 losses. They're
Mhm.
not getting in. They still have to play USC and Washington, I believe. Their schedule, Oregon's schedule and Iowa's schedule kind of mirror each other in a lot of ways. You can check me on the Washington part. I know they play at USC the week after.
They go at USC and then host Michigan State and at Nebraska to close the year.
Okay.
So not as tough. The
Not
USC
quite as
game
tough.
is tough. You're going to USC, but Michigan State is towards the bottom of the Big Ten right now, and Nebraska is a good team, but is not competing with these other ranked teams in the Big Ten.
And without Dylan Raiola, probably won't be very
Mhm.
competitive down the stretch either. But my point is Iowa needs this game. Oregon needs this game for their college football playoff hopes. Any distant chances of making a conference championship game? Both these teams have one loss in Big Ten play, so they're still alive in theory. Both have losses to Indiana, so the tiebreaker doesn't help. But the point remains, this is a big game for both teams, and a loss really kind of puts a lot of pressure on the back end of their season in Oregon's case. And it kind of changes what the narratives are for Iowa of like, hey, maybe this is an 8 or a 9-win team. Well, it's guaranteed to be a 9-win team at best if they take the loss. So I'm curious to see what this looks like on Saturday. The elements are going to play a role. I guess it's if you're an Oregon fan, you're relieved to a certain degree that Oregon had a kind of a trial run in the elements against Wisconsin the last time out. You're probably not thrilled with some of the outcomes from that game. Although like Oregon almost played better in the elements when it was wet than it did prior to that, strangely. Like I remember we looked at each other when Oregon got the ball at the 1 yard line there with about 8 or 9 minutes to go in the first half and said, of course, when they're almost in their own end zone, here comes the rain. And now it's going to be tough. And from that point on, Oregon goes on a 21-0 run and maybe basically puts the game away. It was never really up for grabs, but that will certainly play a role in this game. It's supposed to be a lot of the similar kind of weather indicators we're looking at here. Winds in the 15 to 20 mile per hour range, heavy rain, going to be colder. I've seen it forecast is in the mid to low 40s for the Wisconsin game. I believe that was more like mid to low 50s. There's some possibility of snow. I don't think it looks super likely based upon what I've seen, but I'm also not a meteorologist and I don't know Midwest weather quite as well as people out there. And so maybe someone in the comment will say, oh yeah, no, it's definitely going to be some white on the ground out there. That would be kind of fun. I think this is an interesting part because we're going to start here with the Oregon offense of just how does Oregon approach a game if once again throwing is just not super opportune. Because we saw them lean on the run game in the second half there with pretty impressive results against a Wisconsin defense that was their strength. Iowa's defense is also its biggest strength is its rush defense, although its defense as a whole is significantly better than Wisconsin's. Is that a thing you think they can do in this game? Is that how you would approach it if the weather is tough? Like what's your thoughts on navigating those challenges against a defense that, again, is right up there near the top of the national leaderboard in rushing allowed defense?
I think that's where you start with things is trying to find what you found and that drive to open the second quarter where they went down 16 plays, 99 yards, Jordan Davison just pounding the ball that entire drive and then carrying that momentum into the second half of that Wisconsin game where even when Dante Moore is out, that they were running the football really well to the point that Brock Thomas could make some plays when he was asked to. In theory, you have Dante Moore this whole game. If you establish the run early, you can try to work things off of that later. But I think is hitting the run. I think Davison is going to be very key in this game. And if you can break something out explosive with Noah Whittington, this team has been very good at limiting explosive runs as Iowa defense. But that could be a potentially game-changing factor because you do have guys in Deer Hill and Noah Whittington at running back who can take a house call 50 yards anytime. They haven't played a defense as good as Iowa's, but Iowa hasn't played guys that are have that juice and that explosiveness in every game. So I think that could be, if you could break one of those off, that could be absolutely game changing. But it should start with pounding Davison up the middle, running those duo calls and working the stuff that you found at the end of that last game that was really working.
You led me right into the next thing I wanted to touch on, which is the explosive run game. This is really interesting as well. And I guess just one baseline stat before we get right to that is Oregon's rush offense is number 9 nationally. Iowa's rush defense is number 10 nationally. So this is a true strength on strength. And especially when you look at how these teams operate with explosives, Oregon is first in the country in rushes of 20 yards or more. They have 24 runs this year of that length, 10 over 30, 5 over 40. Iowa hasn't given up a run over 30 yards all season. They've allowed one run over 20 all season. One run. over 20 yards our season. These guys have not given up anything from an explosive run perspective. Is Oregon able to make that change? Like, it's going to be difficult. And I do think this is a game where I look at it based upon what I've seen from Iowa's edge players and its outside and its linebackers. Like, I don't know if this is a big D'Air Hill off tackle outside zone game based upon what we've seen there. They are very, very stout off the edge in particular. It's going to have to be between the tackles. Oregon's offensive line, that is its strength. Iowa has Aaron Graves in there, a really, really high-end interior lineman. I'm fascinated by that part. And if they are going to be able to gap them, how are they able to get that done? Because, again, this is an Iowa defense that plays very disciplined football, very sound, very stout up front. A lot of NFL caliber players in that front seven. I'm not saying they're first-round draft talents, but guys that are going to play on Sundays. It's going to be a real challenge to hit some explosives there. But I'm with you that, like, that feels incredibly important for Oregon in terms of trying to find a path to a win. And I say try to find, like, it's unlikely. That's not necessarily how I feel, but a path to a win, to me, requires finding some explosives on the ground.
Yeah, I think it's less so the outside zone runs and stuff like that. What really worked the last game, the Wisconsin game, was once Davison got some of those outside zone carries, but the way he can put his foot in the ground and get upfield on those and take them between the tackles, sure. When guys were losing blocks on the edges and he was making reads and stuff. I think you got to hope you can get a counter to work right, and you get numbers on one side and you can get those guys to the outside. They weren't doing much with the outside runs against Wisconsin until they got in that second half, pulled out a couple of counters, got things to the outside with Whittington, like on a pitch play early in that one. I think that's what you got to look to instead of trying to just beat these Iowa defensive linemen one-on-one, because they're really good. They've stood up a lot of teams all year. Oregon's offensive line is good, but this is going to be, besides Indiana, probably the best defensive line they play this season. So it's going to be a challenge. You got to find ways to scheme around it when you're not just going to outmatch the other team physically the entire game.
One other thing, just to put context on this Iowa rush defense, somebody asked about this on the site because that stat of 1 yard or one rush of 20 or more yards all season was popping around. People were going like, man, that's pretty concerning. Iowa has not faced great rush offenses in terms of explosive run game. I was looking at this. They have played Indiana, which is second behind Oregon in a tie for most explosive yards, or explosive runs, I should say. The rest of their conference opponents are all 98th or worse, including a couple teams right at the very bottom in Wisconsin and Rutgers. So it is possible that we're looking at a sample size here that maybe inflates that strength a little bit. It's also very possible we come out of this game going like, nope, that was something we thought maybe Oregon could exploit a little bit. Maybe they could find some ways to burst a couple big ones, break a couple. That just wasn't the case. That's going to be a fascinating part for when Oregon has the football.
I will say, though, that one explosive run this season did come from Katron Allen, who put up 145 yards on this team. The out of the two Penn State running backs, he's been the guy who's really taken off this season. And that was after their injury problems to Drew Aller. Everything started collapsing at Penn State. So he was able to still have a really good game, generate an explosive at one point in that. He had 28 carries in that one. They were just pounding the rock a lot because it was, I think that was the first game post Aller. They were trying to figure things out. They have been all season, but there was, that is an example of someone being able to find some success on the ground against this Iowa defense.
Once again, you bring me to the next point I wanted to touch on, because you brought up Penn State, and I wanted to touch on the Dante Moore kind of narrative and how we're talking about him. I feel like we're just ignoring what he did to Penn State in that game and the way he played in that game, which is against an elite defense in a really tough environment. And people are focusing on Indiana and Wisconsin almost exclusively, games where the opposition rattled him a little bit, got in his head. Second half against Wisconsin, obviously we don't know how he would have turned it around because he was knocked out really quickly. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays really, really well in this game. And I feel like I haven't heard enough of that this week, because people are kind of turning to, and I've been guilty of this myself, of just pointing out, like, young quarterback, a defense that is known to throw some exotics, that has some really good players up front, a defensive coordinator that, for my money, is as good as anybody in the country. This is going to be a tough ask. all that's true. I also think Dante Moore possesses some special talent as a quarterback that I feel like we're just kind of overlooking and kind of going, oh, he's this young, unproven guy. He can't win them a game. They might need him, frankly, to win this game. And part of the reason we started on the run offense there is like that is a strength of Oregon's offense against a strength of Iowa's defense. But I also wanted to bring up how difficult this was going to be, because if it becomes a game where the rush offense isn't able to do what it did in the second half against Wisconsin, or what it's done in some of these other mop-up games where they just rolled teams like Rutgers, it is going to fall on Dante Moore to make some throws and to be composed back there and to read the defense and to get the protection set. All these things we've been talking about. And frankly, the thing that you go back to Penn State that was most encouraging, John, at least in my mind, was what he was able to do out of structure when there was a pass rush, when he was forced to roll right and throw it across the field. Those are dangerous plays, but those are risks that paid off in that game. What are your thoughts on Dante Moore going into this one? Because I feel like a lot of people are kind of not sure what they have at quarterback. And I think if he takes a step here and he puts together a strong game, I'm not saying he's back in the Heisman Trophy race. I think that ship has probably sailed unless he finishes on an absolute scorcher. Maybe that's what this starts this weekend. But I think it will shape the narrative of like how you anticipate this team plays, because we know what it looks like when Oregon has a really high-end quarterback leading its offense. We've seen that for a decade or so now. It hasn't felt like that every week this season. I think if that's the way, if he comes out in this particular matchup and plays really well in tough environment, really tough weather, potentially tough defense, I think that's going to be something that says a lot about him.
I think the biggest thing I'd be looking for Dante this weekend is just having that comfort level, being able to look like he's not flustered back there, because that's what it looked like against Indiana and Wisconsin when he was struggling, when teams were sending blitzes at him, rotating in coverage, and his pre-snap and his post-snap wasn't lining up. It was really clear, because you could just see him missing easy reads that he was hitting early in the season. And like you said, the out of structure playmaking early on, it was so good, especially again in that Penn State game. Some of the big time plays he made in that one. We talked about the one to Sadiq, the game winner to Gary Bryant. But what he was so good at early in the season was that negative play avoidance. He was so good at not taking sacks. His pressure to sack ratio was super low early on in the year. He wasn't putting the ball at risk. Even in these games, he hasn't. You're not worried about him turning it over all the time necessarily, but the sacks have been the thing that has really killed some of these drives early in the last couple of weeks. So if you can handle that, I was pass rush is good. They're gonna get after Oregon's offensive tackles, but I think getting the ball out quickly. I think I would look for this to, if I'm want it to be a successful Dante Moore game, like the Montana State game from the beginning of the year, where he's getting it out of his hands quickly, hitting underneath passes and just operating the offense smoothly rather than trying to attack downfield. And then when he has to, make some plays out of structure, because you're going to have to against this Iowa pass rush, because they're going to come after you, but just make sure you're not panicking and missing reads. The things that we've seen over the last couple of weeks, when that's not the player he is. The work that went into this over the last offseason. It's some of it's that seeing ghosts thing that can happen when you just get when you feel like you're under pressure, even if you're not. Just finding collecting himself, finding that sense of calmness to trust in that he knows what he's seeing. Because I think that's the biggest thing, is when you start not like trusting what you're seeing out there, then it can really start messing with you, and then you start making decisions that don't line up with what you should be doing.
You might have more on the offense, but here's the last thing I had. And it kind of touches on what you said there a little bit. I think it's really imperative you don't allow Iowa to have short fields. We'll get into the Iowa offense versus the Oregon defense here momentarily. But one of the things that's really staggering when you look at Iowa, even in its 4 conference wins, like this is a team that's averaging over 30 points in conference play with just over 300 yards. And the reason they've been able to achieve that is teams make a lot of mistakes. They've had, I think, 8 interceptions in conference play. One's gone for a touchdown. A couple others have got ball right down there near the goal line. Their punt return is something we want to talk about on this. They have the best punt returner in the country. He has 2 punt return touchdowns, a bunch of explosive punt returns outside of those. But my point, I guess, is for the last thought on the offense, and again, if you have more, go ahead and add on, is just you can't make this a game where you make a bunch of mistakes and you hand Iowa field position advantage.
Yeah,
it's been sorry, one last, I was just going to say it's been limited this year in terms of Iowa's ability to go the length of the field What you can't do is give them hidden yardage by giving them turnovers, putting the ball in opportune positions for the defense. And that's kind of the last key for me for the offense. Just don't make big mistakes that make it easy for Iowa's offense.
Yeah, you put yourself behind just field position wise. It's an easy way to just give Iowa field goals and just put yourself in a hole that you're going to have to dig out of later. Iowa's going to want to limit possessions, just control the clock in general and limit the amount of times that your other team's offense is going to be on the field. So I think doing that for Oregon is going to be big because we've seen in games like the Indiana game, how much Indiana was able to control the clock, and especially late down the stretch of that one, what it did to Oregon's defense and how exhausted they were out on the field just because you couldn't get off of it. If you can keep these guys on defense fresh by controlling it on offense, running the football, which we already said should be the main, focal point of the game plan. I think that's going to be really key in this game because that's exactly what Iowa wants to do. It's in terms of beating them at their own game at that.
Anything else you had on this side of the ball, or should we jump over to Oregon on defense?
Let's talk some defense.
And I think I want to start by saying this is a really interesting matchup. And if the weather was a little different, I'd probably feel a little different. But I am a little bit wary of the fact that the one thing Iowa does really, really well is the one thing both sides are going to be relying on, and that's run the football. This Iowa offensive line is for real. 5 of their 6 best PFF grades on offense are offensive linemen. All 5 of those guys are among the 10 best graded offensive linemen in the Big Ten. And all 5 of those guys are, I think, top 5 at least in their position group nationally on PFF. So this is a really talented, rugged group that's been very, very successful this year. And they've been especially good run blocking. It's really important that Oregon shows up here and wreaks some havoc. I was looking at it kind of in my prep leading in. It kind of goes a little overlooked, maybe how good Oregon's defense is from a statistical resume perspective, like top 10 and everything, including a top 25 rush defense. Also hasn't been a group that's made a lot of plays behind the line of scrimmage, which maybe people are picking up, maybe they're not, but averaging about 4 tackles for loss per game. I think you need like almost double that this game. Like you have to win on first and second down. And I just pulled this stat earlier today. Iowa in Big Ten play is 9 for 19, up just under 50% on short yardage third down conversions. They're 1 of 16 on long, which is 9 yards or more. Like if you can make this a game where it's 3rd and 7 or longer, Iowa's not very likely based upon its track record to convert those. So winning on first and second is imperative. And I think getting some 2nd and 12s and 2nd and 11s and those kind of starts there where second down it's you're facing 2nd and 7, but now it's 3rd and 9. Like those feel imperative to me in this kind of a game, especially when it's going to be big body on big body smashing into each other. Like Oregon's going to have to find ways to win there. And that's an area where, frankly, like if there is a weakness of the defense, I don't know if you totally agree with this, John, but that's where I point to, especially at linebacker. They've had a really hard time filling some of those gaps.
Yeah.
So that to me is they had 2 weeks to prepare for this. We kind of know what Iowa does. They're not going to fool you very much. Although I will say David Eicholt from Hawkeye Insider came on our podcast a couple of days ago and did bring up the fact that they might be incorporating some slow mesh in this game, which would be interesting.
I hate slow mesh. I get it football wise, but it's so annoying to try to defend and everything about it. I get why the strategy, but it's like it goes against the point of football. It feels like.
What are your thoughts, though? Just big picture, Oregon, especially up front, in that front 7, trying to slow down on an Iowa rush attack, which is really their entire offense this year, based upon the data we have.
Yeah, like you were saying, I think getting this offense behind the sticks is the biggest thing that you can do. This offense, the one thing they don't want to do is just try to straight drop back and pass the ball. The more you can get them into have to pass situations where you can get your pass rushers after him. It's going to be hard against this Iowa offensive line in the first place, but just force them to try to drop back and throw the ball downfield, because it's not something their receivers have done particularly well. It's not something it's like Gronowski. There we go. I wanted to make sure I got it right here. I didn't want to call him Gronkowski or something.
You're one letter off. It would have been easy to make that
exactly.
Mistake.
Yeah, Gronowski he doesn't want to throw the ball downfield and drop back out of these shotgun situations. He does the best when they're throwing it short underneath, working the screen game, and then using the play action off of their run game. They're an outside zone team. I think Derrick Henry with the Titans, the way that Caleb Johnson got a lot of comparisons to that, the way they used him last year. They worked that outside zone, and it works because you have such a strong offensive line. So this is going to be, you got to be gap disciplined in your linebackers. Like you got to be really disciplined and make sure you're not jumping gaps to try to make plays, because then all of a sudden you leave one and you can break off a big run. And then, like you said too, making tackles for loss in the backfield has got to be a big game for the edge rushers, Tatum Tuioti, Mateo Uiagalelei. Those guys they're going to be attacked all game with these outside zone runs. So you've got to be able to set hard edges. And then what Tatum Tuioti has done really well, chase down those runs from the backside to be able to pick up those TFLs. Because at times you have as good of an athlete as Amari Washington is, he'll get himself out of position at times by getting too far in the backfield. And then same with Bryce Betcher, can make some big plays, but sometimes you saw it in that Wisconsin game, jump into a hole and then the fullback picks the other hole, and all of a sudden it's an easy first down.
It feels like a Mateo game. Not saying they can't win if he doesn't play well, but it really would help if he played better. And I say better because I think we've been pretty honest. I think the fans are picking up on it. 3 tackles in the last 3 games, 1 per each of those games. No tackles for loss. And we know he's not the best against the run. That's the area that's kind of been picked over for the entire career. I think it's been a little better this year at times, a little bit less good recently, I would say. He's going to have to find some way to be successful. I think their left tackle, if there is a weak point on Iowa's offensive line, that's probably it. At least based upon PFF grades, Trevor Lauk, still 80.5 overall. That's really good. Oregon has 1 offensive lineman with a PFF grade better than that, and that's Emmanuel Pregnon. But I think you got to find ways to unleash Mateo, or he needs to find a way to unleash himself. Because like you said, there are some susceptibilities in this defense, and it's a problem when one of the guys you're going to be playing almost every down, I believe is 2nd or 3rd on the defense in snaps, because he is such a difference maker on passing downs. You don't want to take him off the field. At the same time, if I was going to run the ball every down, and this is something Mateo said, of they probably don't want to throw the ball at all, which kind of takes away his bread and butter. I don't think Oregon would ever quite do this, but could Ashton Porter play a sizable role? Could he play more, just because he is their better run defense edge between those 2 individuals? I don't know, but he is a person I am very interested to see how he performs here, because it's been kind of highlighted now that he's had a hard time the last 3 games, and especially the Wisconsin game feels a little bit similar, where it was a game where you just know they weren't going to have much of any success throwing the football. Iowa is below Wisconsin in pass yards per game. Mark Ganowski has 11 rushing touchdowns and 4 passing touchdowns. These are very interesting stats in the year 2025 to see a quarterback who has almost 3 times as many rushing touchdowns as passing touchdowns. They haven't had a pass game over 200 yards. It's a game where you anticipate they want to run the ball a bunch, and if that's going to be the game plan, you need the player that everybody going into the year thought was your best defensive player to play like it.
Yeah. Like you said, we came into the year, we thought Mateo is a guy who could find himself in first round conversations at the end of the year. I think he still could play his way there. But yeah, you just gotta just play physical on the outside, on the edge. I think that's what Tatum Tuioti does so well at, is he's so he's really good at using leverage when setting the edge. Mateo will use that strong arm, and you get into the offensive tackle shoulder, keep them at length, but he doesn't have the same. He's so tall that he doesn't. Tatum's 6'3", can get up a little bit lower, kind of create that leverage to hold these offensive linemen back. When you see Mateo trying to set the edge, he'll get pushed 2 yards back, 2 yards to the outside in a way that Tatum just doesn't at times. It's not his strong suit. Tatum's certainly the better run defender of these guys. It's just what they do. Mateo's he's got more variety as a pass rusher. Tatum's the run defender. But you just need those guys to have really standout games. And I think making plays in the backfield, if Mateo Uiagalelei can do that, that would be the big thing looking for him. And then on those passing downs where you can, sending some extra rushers to try to create one-on-one matchups for those guys, to let Mateo use the physical tools he has, that length, to get around the outside on some of those chop moves. Because I was looking earlier, this Iowa team, they've allowed 1 pressure all season that wasn't on a designed blitz with extra rushers. So these offensive linemen, like we've been saying, they hold up strong. They are really good. They win their one-on-one matchups. So you got to try to create ways to send two guys at these offensive linemen to then with a sim pressure, sending blitzes, get after Gronowski a little bit, even if they're not going to, you look back to the Wisconsin game. Wisconsin had seven true like drop back opportunities for those guys to get after the quarterback. I think it's going to be a pretty similar mark, but take advantage where you can there, because if you can get a big sack, that'll really mess up one of these drives that can completely kill one of them.
It's exactly what I wanted to finish with on this side of the ball. I mentioned it. You can make it 3rd and long. Those become pass downs. Those become probably a little longer developing plays. Oregon is great in the screen game defensively. I don't know if I expect Iowa to really attack that part, especially because Oregon has the speed advantage. I know Caden Wetchen is a name to know there. He's a big punt returner who we'll talk about a little bit later when we talk special teams in our props section. But I anticipate those are downs where they are going to try to throw the ball down the field a little bit. And if that's the case, to your point, John, if you can get Mateo Tatum, some other players home, maybe somebody like you mentioned off some sort of sim pressure, some sort of blitz, something exotic that they don't block very well or unprepared for, that can be a game changer, right? This is a game where I don't think either of us think a ton of points are going to be scored.
And if it's wet too, like if you can get a clean hit on a quarterback or a running back in the backfield, make a like footballs there's going to be a good chance that at least 1 or 2 footballs end up on the ground. So you like just as many of those opportunities as you can get, the more chances you have to make a game-changing fumble recovery on the 20-yard line that can set you up for a touchdown.
I feel like they are due some good luck with those bouncing balls, because how many times did Wisconsin put it on the turf? Sometimes by their own fault with bad center quarterback exchanges, but also sometimes because Oregon was all over them. That would be a game changer. That just as I was kind of saying, excuse me, at the end of the offense section earlier about how you can't give Iowa short fields. It's the same story here, because this is a game that I think we both expect to be fairly low scoring. If you could get early, let's say Oregon has some success offensively, and then the defense is able to manufacture a short field for the offense later, and Oregon can make it a 2-score game early. That's the recipe for separation. That's the recipe for getting out of this game. Maybe not with a ton of suspense and a ton of concern in the fourth quarter. I still expect, and we'll get to game picks here in a couple minutes, it to be a game that plays out where it's interesting late. But the path to avoiding that would be offense has success and defense is able to not only do its job and limit what Iowa does, but maybe force a turnover, get some big sacks, change the game for them.
Yeah, I think getting Iowa in a situation where you if you can get up 2 scores at any point in this game and make Iowa feel like they have to pass in the second half, that's what you should be looking to do. If you can get this offense rolling early, punch the ball into the end zone and make Iowa feel like they have to pass in the second half, that's going to make your defense so much more successful if you can get them out of these situations where they feel comfortable running the football and controlling the clock, because that's what they're going to want to do this entire game.
Anything else you got on this side of the ball?
No, let's get into some of these picks here.
All right, we'll take a quick break here, and then we'll jump into some props, get into our game picks, and wrap up this show before I head east to Iowa. All right, welcome back to the Autzen Audibles podcast. We were running through this a little bit before we hit record. I don't think it was a sterling or stellar week for either of us in the props, and frankly, I don't think we've had. I think we did okay against Rutgers because we just picked Oregon to do a lot of good things offensively.
Yeah.
They did a ton of good things offensively. But we were just recapping it, John. What did we go like? Maybe each of us were 1 of 5, 2 of 5, something like that?
I think so. I think I didn't realize how hard it was going to be raining in that Wisconsin game. I knew it was going to be raining. I didn't know it was going to be like one of the worst rain events I've seen in 4 years of living in Eugene. So I think that continues to like the Indiana game when we just don't quite pick the game script going right. These picks end up these props end up kind of all over the place.
Yeah, you're right. That's what it is. If we get the wrong game script, we get all the props wrong because we're just on the wrong side of all the angles here. Let's see how we do this week. First one here, and again, we've gone to Twitter/X, and we've gone to Blue Sky, and we've gone to the DuckTerritory Duck Pond message board. For these, a little mixed from all 3 of those platforms to help us with this show. First one here is from @Tyler Lehman OR. This is a pivotal one. Oregon over under 165 rushing yards. I'll let you go first, John.
I will go with over just because I think that's going to be the strategy that it takes for Oregon to win this game. Last week against Wisconsin, they end up with just over 200 once they really do start hammering that run into the second half. I think that's got to be a mark you're looking to get is I was reading your Skopil Audibles picks. I think it was like 174 or something that Iowa's allowed in a game this season. You got to be trying to push that to close to 200 if you want to win this one, because that's going to where it starts, is on the ground running that ball with Jordan Davison.
Yeah, I did go, one of my, as John said, Skopil Audibles predictions was over 174 for 175. So I will also take the over. Again, this is game script. This is, we're trying to formulate the path to a victory. And if Oregon is going to win this game, I find it unlikely they do so with a kind of a below average to average rush day. And frankly, a 175 rush day against this Iowa defense, which has just shut down absolutely everybody, would be a stellar day. That would be a good day. Like, that would be a very above average day, even though on the season, compared to other rushing performances, it would be, kind of, I think, back half, back third from that perspective. So both of us taking the over on Tyler's rush prop. Going to go over this one from @LandoCrack. Which team will have more punt return yards? #Autzen Audibles. This is a fun one just because I discovered this one, and I will tip of the cap to our good friend James Ferguson Reynolds for bringing it up. I didn't realize this was actually the case. Oregon has not allowed a single punt return yard all season.
Yeah, it tends to be fair catches now. I'm thinking of it, or pinning it down inside. Yeah,
so that has been something they haven't done. And the counter is Iowa has more punt return yards than anybody this season. So it is a rare, very good on very good special teams battle here. Caden Wetchen, man, this guy is really dynamic. And it's not just like the stats say one thing, but then you watch it and you're just like, yeah, this guy has a future playing on Sundays, maybe only as a returner, although he's pretty dynamic in the open field. I think they'll try to get his fingerprints. I mentioned the screen game earlier and how that's been a benefit, kind of a strength for Oregon's defense. That's where he finds success offensively as well.
Yeah, he's got a negative ADOT this year. Like, they throw him, it averages behind the line of scrimmage.
Which tells you it's all screen game, and that's where they'll try to hit him. But if we're getting into this punt return part, I'm gonna go with Iowa having more punt return yardage, in part because Oregon also fair catches it basically every time, just like their punter leads to a lot of fair catches or positions where they just don't return it. Oregon doesn't really have an explosive punt return game. Wetchen is super aggressive. Like, that's one of the things that's interesting too, is it's not just that he's a guy who's averaging, this is pretty impressive, about 50 yards per game in terms of returns and 24.4 yards per return on 16 this year. Oregon's going to try to punt the ball away from him. They'll try to down it at the 1 yard line. They'll try to maybe punt it out of bounds, try to find ways to keep him just away from the football. He has a knack for just finding himself and the football and creating returns that maybe most returners wouldn't have. And frankly, maybe in a wet environment that costs him. And you see him try to force the issue and put himself in a place that he shouldn't be, and the ball pops out. Maybe that's the way it plays out, but I lean he'll have more return success than Oregon.
Yeah, same. Mostly just for the factor that Oregon doesn't like to return punts for the most part. Gary Bryant tends to fair catch it, and even when he does, it doesn't get super aggressive. And I mean, like you said, we're going against the best punt returner in the country, probably in Wetchen. So it's going to be tough to find that advantage. Although it will be interesting to see that matchup between him and Ferguson Reynolds. If Ferguson Reynolds tries to keep the ball away from him, trying to pin them back deep, because like we've been saying earlier, if you can have a big Ferguson Reynolds game where he has multiple punts inside the 10, potentially maybe even the 5 or something, the further that you're going to have to make this Iowa team drive the football, which they don't want to do. So
big punting game, honestly. This is a place that,
I mean, it's Iowa. That's what Iowa is known for.
Right. And Oregon strangely comes in, not historically a fantastic special teams program, but this year in this specific facet, I think has one of the best punt coverage units. That's going to be a really fascinating matchup, and see if that impacts the game. Just getting Wetchen not involved, kind of eliminating him. How does that impact Iowa's offense? And the flip side, if he's able to flip the game here with a big return, what does that do to it? That's going to be big. But we both think Iowa has the advantage there. Third one here from @Backroll23. This is from Blue Sky. With the wet weather, total fumbles over under in the game 1.5. Also total turnovers over under 2.5. I'll let you lead this one, John.
I'll take the over on both of those. I think if we're just talking fumbles that hit the ground, I think 1.5 is an easy over. And not just like recovered fumbles, but turnovers in general. I think Gronowski has a chance to throw a pick in this game. He's not been the most. It's just not the most accurate quarterback situation at Iowa. It's Iowa football. That's what they do. But
Okay.
I think that turnovers could be an area for sure. I think there will be plenty of opportunity, which is with fumbles potentially if it's wet and stuff like that. But if you can get 1 or 2 interceptions in this game, I think that would be pretty easy to hit that 2.5 mark. And I'm not counting out for Dante Moore either, because Iowa could get after him with the pass rush and force him into a situation where he's scrambling and puts the ball in jeopardy. Something he hasn't done very often this year. But you're going into a tough situation against one of the best defenses in a spot that's going to be really hard to play football when it's cold and wet like it's going to be.
Yeah, you're right. Dante Moore has 4 interceptions this year. The Oregon quarterback position, though, historically just doesn't turn the ball over. Like Dylan Gabriel had 6 in all of 2024. I believe Bo Nix had 3 in all of 2023. Like it's just a position where the ball hasn't been thrown to the other team very often. If there is a quarterback, though, in terms of these guys, who's most likely, it probably is a Dante as a young quarterback. I'll also take the over. I had not interpreted it as just total fumbles. As fumbles lost. If it's total fumbles, that's a smash the over. I think the ball is going to be on the ground a fair amount because of the weather. And then just the total turnovers overall. I'll say there's going to be 3 in this game. It feels like if the weather gets weird, things get weird.
I think 3 is a solid number. You get 2 from whoever loses, 1 from whoever wins. I think it's going to be hard to come out of this game without a turnover when you're playing in these elements with defenses as good as they are.
This one leans right into it. This is from the Duck Pond message board over at DuckTerritory from Ductor Quacks. There will be more total turnovers than total touchdown passes in this game. Yes, I think so. Because I think Iowa probably won't throw one. I think at most Dante Moore throws 2. And if we've just mathed it out that we think there's going to be 3 in this game, 3 is more than 2. More turnovers than touchdown passes.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think this is a fun one. Plays right into what this game is likely going to be pretty perfectly. So I would also take the over there, or the more turnovers and touchdowns. Because I think we'll get into these score predictions, but it's not going to be high enough scoring where you're going to have, especially with these teams, 4 or 5 passing touchdowns total. So,
and the final one here from C Quack, also from the message board. This is what I'm gonna let you go first because I want to kind of interpret this a little more. Oregon will rush for more yards than passing, and Iowa will pass for more yards than rushing. John, my brain's a little broken. The second half of that feels so unlikely that I lean no, but what say you?
I was actually done it in half of their games this year. Tends to be the games where they don't hit as high rushing numbers, but I think it's going to be tough. Oregon has had one of the best pass defenses in the country. When you look at guys like Brandon Finney, what he's been able to do at cornerback, Dylan Thieneman at safety, this team has been very effective, and especially what we've seen them against in the last couple of weeks against Rutgers, against Wisconsin, holding both of those quarterbacks under 50% completion, under 100 yards total. I think it's going to be tough for that one. I think Oregon rushing for more yards than passing for, I think that I could certainly see happening. So finalize these picks. I think Oregon will rush for more yards than they pass for, but I don't think Iowa will pass for more yards than they rush for, especially not in this weather against Oregon's defense.
We kind of breezed through the Oregon pass defense part because I think listeners know Oregon's pass defense has been statistically the best in the country this year, and it's going against an Iowa pass offense that isn't one of the best. In fact, it has the lowest yards per game in the conference. I think the second fewest touchdown passes behind Wisconsin. Mark Gronowski has 1 touchdown pass in Big Ten play. So yeah, I lean the same way you do there. And if both do hit, I'm very fascinated by who ends up winning this football game, because I'm kind of wondering how if I was throwing the ball with a lot of success, is that what's happening? Or does that mean Oregon's just totally stacked up the run game and Iowa throws for like 130 yards, but only rushes for 95 or 100 or something? I don't know. All right. That will conclude that portion of the show. Let's move over to game picks here, John. As has been the case every week since you've taken over, we will let you go first. What do you think?
I think it's going to be low scoring. I think it's going to play out pretty similar to this Wisconsin game. The Wisconsin game from last season, even I mentioned it to Mateo Uiagalelei this week. He had a huge game in that Wisconsin game, and And that was one where you're going to a traditional Big Ten spot in a cold, late November kind of atmosphere. But I'm going to go with 17-13. Oregon gets this one done. Both teams are going to be controlling the football. I think you're going to have. I think I could end up with like Jordan Davis in 2 touchdowns. No one else puts one in the end zone. But Oregon wins a game that doesn't require a lot from Dante Moore. But hopefully you see some promising signs that it's not. You're not going to continue to follow these trends that we've seen against Indiana and against Wisconsin.
I've kind of gone back and forth all week on how I thought this game was going to play. I'm not picking it this way, but there is a scenario where Oregon is a little bit more dynamic offensively than we're expecting, and it is a matter of Iowa just hasn't faced an offense with these kind of athletes. Like even Indiana, going into that game, what was our consensus? That Oregon had better athletes on the outside than Indiana did. Indiana wins that game. I don't think it was entirely because they had better athletes. I think Elijah Surratt proved to be the most dynamic person on the outside. I don't think he was the best athlete. There is an angle where Oregon ends up putting up 31 points, 35 points, and that's just too much for Iowa to handle. I don't think that's how it's going to play out. I think the weather conditions make that really difficult to kind of lean that way. I've got a very similar score. I've got Oregon winning 21-16. I think this is going to be a nail biter. I think this is going to be a game that you're not comfortable with. I think this is a game, frankly, where like a lot of the Will Stein needs to be on a different coaching staff next year comments are going to pop up, and they're going to seem really silly in the context of what this game will be because of the weather, because of the caliber of opposing defense. Because like throwing screen passes when the wind's going 20 miles per hour actually is maybe the most, and on behind the sticks is actually maybe not the worst decision in a game that's going to be mostly ball control. So I fully anticipate Oregon's offense is not going to dominate this game. I wrote in my Skopil Damas, and actually this is something I didn't even notice in the moment, but I should have picked up on it. I actually only noticed it today going through prep for my column. The 335 yards against Wisconsin are the fewest yards Oregon's managed in a win of the Dan Lanning era. They've been over 400 yards in I think it was 36 of their 42, something like that they've won. I think it likely, and this is my prediction in the column, that Oregon finishes below 335 in a win. I think this is going to be an absolute just slugfest, and I'm excited to see it. Mm-hmm. I'm excited if it actually does snow. That would be fun. Just from I love rain games. Snow games are even better. You don't get to see a whole lot of those out west.
I think I saw snow on Sunday when I was looking at the forecast, but I was just trying to Google things earlier.
Well, I hope that's not the case because I'm flying back that day. Hopefully that doesn't make it more difficult. So yeah, I would say my conviction or my confidence level in this is not extremely high. I do feel rather confident Oregon gets to the win here. I know that runs counter to some of the national narratives. I've seen this as a real trendy upset pick, and I get why. Like I was playing its best, like from just a glance at the stats, this is the best offense you've seen from Iowa in a long time. We know what this defense has been under Phil Parker for, however long he's been there, decades. I totally respect and value what they have. I think at the end of the day, like if Oregon has the talent advantage that we think they have, just from a top end perspective, this is a game you should win. And if you're a team that has real aspirations for not just making the college football playoff, but of winning a national championship and competing for it, and that's been the goal that they have stated all year, then this is a game you have to win. And again, really, to your point earlier, John, like if you lose this game, you put so much pressure on yourself just to even make a repeat at the CFP this year. You lose this game, I still think there's a path to doing it if you win out. You'd be rooting like heck for USC maybe to beat Iowa the following week just to take Iowa out of the picture. But it would become a really difficult scenario and put a lot of pressure on the back end of the season. Winning this game, not that it removes all pressure by any means, but I think this is the hardest game on the schedule. I don't know if Iowa's necessarily a level above either USC or Washington. Certainly the college football playoff rankings suggest those teams are pretty evenly matched right now based on resume.
It presents a certain challenge, though, that Iowa has.
Exactly. This is a challenge. This is a different kind of matchup. Like Oregon knows USC and Washington better than anybody else on the schedule. They have played those teams a lot in recent history. Washington every year for decades. USC, there's been some gaps, but like, USC, that personnel because you recruited against those guys. Iowa's a totally different beast. Like, it's super admirable, by the way. Like, I think 80% of their roster and like is from the state of Iowa. They're a homegrown team that plays a certain style of football, and it's a style of football that you said, John. Like, it does present a different kind of challenge. So I like Oregon to win. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I don't think it's a game that's going to like settle in the fans, certain contingents of it. I think fans that like really understand kind of what's at stake and the matchup will go, gosh, any win in Iowa City on Saturday is going to mean something. I don't think it's going to pass the eye test. I think there's going to be people questioning a lot of things coming out of it, but I do think they're going to win.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be showing that you can learn from what happened early in that Wisconsin game and kind of that what we said against Indiana. The challenge was that they weren't able to adapt. We saw some of that the adaptation come against Wisconsin. Let's continue to see that and continue to see those counters to what Iowa's going to do, because Iowa is going to like every team does, come out with things that aren't expected. So
the last thing I have here is this is going to be fascinating for the Oregon staff. Doesn't do well coming off a bye week. They took one loss earlier this year coming off a bye. I ran through the data after that. Like, they've actually been rather successful.
It was inconclusive. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like, there wasn't much there. If this is a game we come out, Oregon loses and we come away going like, really felt like the other team had the coaching advantage. Really seemed like Iowa was more prepared. That is going to be a narrative that we're talking about, not just the rest of this year, if they do play at, later in the season after a break in the action in postseason, which I guess they are guaranteed to do, whether it be a bowl or CFP, but also in future years as we're looking back, because that'll be a thing of like, oh, they lost twice coming off of bye last year. Well, that's something we need to be talking about. So not that the staff cares at all about what we're talking about on our podcast, but they are aware that will become a narrative if they don't get it done and they come out with a subpar game plan. So going to be exciting, going to be fun. I will be arriving Friday evening in Iowa City. I will be at Kinnick Stadium, 12:30 p.m. Pacific time kick, 2:30 local, game on CBS. Brad Nessler, Gary Danielson, Jenny Dowell, the A-team. This is their third game they've called of Oregon. Oregon did lose the other time, or one of the times, against Indiana on this network. See if that becomes another narrative. They can't win on CBS or something. But I'm excited. I will be there. John and I will be coming to you after the game. I might be doing it from the stadium. I might be doing it from a hotel room. Kind of depends on how the evening goes. But either way, you will have content from the two of us following that. And then next week, we think Mr. Matt Preem is going to make a return, hoping that's the way it plays out. That's what's coming out of the rumor mill here. Let's hope that's the way it comes out. It'd be great to have him back and have him back on the show. But either way, this will be wrapping up this podcast. Erik Skopil, John Evans signing off. See you guys on Saturday. Talk to you later, folks.